You've seen mega deals break records. Today, you'll see them break franchises. This is a countdown of 10 contracts where teams didn't just overpay, they trapped themselves with no trade clauses and deferred money that lingered like a payroll ghost. We'll show you the price per strikeout, the cost per missed game, and what a $32 million nostalgia tax looks like. Stay, because the worst part isn't the numbers, it's how long they hang around. By the end, you'll know which checks bought production and which bought years of regret. Albert Pujols. What does a 10-year deal for a 31-year-old buy? In Anaheim, it bought the back half of a Hall of Fame plaque. The thing is, this wasn't a baseball lab bet, it was a billboard purchase. Arte Moreno chased a marquee headliner to anchor a brand, to sell jerseys and credibility on day one. The roster math, the aging curve math, and the no-trade clause math got pushed to the back seat. A decade starting at age 31 doesn't give you an escape hatch. It gives you a calendar. Pujols signed in December 2011 for $254 million over 10 years, entering his age 32 season. You're not projecting upside at that point. You're financing gravity. With the no-trade clause, the Angels locked themselves into every slow grounder and every week of soreness. No reset button, no soft landing. That created the exact trap big market teams say they can outspend. A long, guaranteed commitment to decline years while the rest of the roster has to bend around it. In St. Louis, peak value came from elite OPS+, better mobility, and real first-base defense. Early in Anaheim, those lines slipped. OPS+ dipped below the star level, legs slowed, and first base turned into mostly DH. That move narrows your options fast. Once you're locked at DH, every other bat has to fight for a single chair, and the defense upside is gone. To put this into perspective, the first half of the deal delivered positive value, but the final 5 years with the Angels slid into negative WAR, and he was below a league average hitter while stuck at DH's aging curves for power bats back this up. Post 32, the research shows a steep drop in production. Year-by-year WAR sagged in a predictable arc, which would be fine on a short commitment. On a 10-year pact, it's a roadmap to sunk cost. Arte Moreno bought AARP Pujols instead of Prime Pujols. The brand won the press conference, the bat lost a step. Now the money lens. Take those down years and slice the $254 million salary into cost per extra base hit. With 8-figure checks flowing, every double and homer carried luxury price tags. When your slugging slips, that cost balloons fast. Fans learned the math by heart and saw roster flexibility vanish. The no-trade clause kept the ledger frozen. Deferred money meant the echo lingered after the box scores moved on. You don't just pay once, you keep paying every spring. It ended the way these deals often do when there's no exit ramp. He was designated for assignment before the contract ran out, a move that underlined how stuck the club was. The key takeaway is simple. The no-trade clause turned a slump into a sentence, and the calendar did the rest. From buying a legacy to paying for whiffs. Chris Davis. How much is an 0 for 54 slump worth? In Baltimore, about $23 million a year. The deal was signed to lock down the home run leader from 2013 and the big power in 2015, and the front office hoped that version would stretch to 2022. The profile was clear. Lift, pull, and punish mistakes. The problem was everything after contact. Once the swing got longer and the league filled the zone with spin and elevated fastballs, that plan fell apart. The contract did not. The 7-year, $161 million deal included $42 million in deferred payments, stretching from 2023 to 2037, meaning Baltimore is still paying for those strikeouts years after he hung up the cleats. From the first season on, the strikeouts rose and the overall contact rate slid. Defensive value at first base couldn't make up the gap when the bat cooled. It left the club with a power bat that wasn't making power contact and no easy way to fix it. When your whiff rate climbs and your glove is average, the roster has to carry dead weight while the money keeps going out. The 2018 season became the low point. He hit .168 and struck out in 37% of plate appearances, which erased whatever value the occasional home run offered. That slump didn't end when the calendar flipped. He ran an 0 for 54 stretch from late 2018 into 2019, which turned every at-bat into a live broadcast of frustration. Teams can live with strikeouts if the damage on contact is massive. Here, it wasn't. Those empty trips kept stacking. Why did it slide so hard? Regression to the mean met a longer swing path, and pitchers found the holes. Elevated four-seamers got him late. Breaking balls under the zone got him early. Without a contact floor, the approach had no safety net, and the contract had no brakes. The more he chased damage, the more pitchers pulled the ladder. Now the money lens. In 2018 and 2019, the salary-to-outcomes math became a running bit and a brutal audit. Fans tallied salary per strikeout and watched the number climb as the Ks piled up late in the deal. The cost per home run ballooned because the homers dried up, so every rare long ball had a luxury price tag. To put this into perspective, paying star money for a handful of hits turns each plate appearance into an invoice. Could they move him? Not really. Even without a formal no-trade clause on the page, the market acted like one existed. The optics of eating that much money, paired with a steep decline and fan backlash, made a deal unrealistic. So the contract sat there while the lineup worked around it. Across the life of the deal, the total came out to negative 2.8 WAR. That means the club paid premium dollars for below-replacement results. A power-only profile, once it loses contact and barrel rate, collapses fast and leaves no exit ramp. If you think paying for strikeouts is bad, try paying for nothing. Robinson Canó. Seattle bought a superstar for $240 million, then paid him to not play, twice. The plan looked tidy on paper. Drop a durable, high-contact second baseman in the middle of the order, let him rack up doubles and keep the ball in play while the lineup grows around him. He rarely missed games, handled second with smooth hands, and gave a market without October buzz a headliner every night. That's the theory. The calendar and the suspension letters didn't care about theory. 2 PED suspensions blew up availability and trust. The first, in 2018, was an 80-game suspension for testing positive for furosemide, a diuretic and masking agent that wiped out half a season and reset how the front office had to talk about him. The second, in 2021, took him off the field for an entire 162-game season after testing positive for stanozolol, at an age when most players are already battling small declines. Meanwhile, his role shifted and the bat slowed. The contact stayed, but the extra base damage dipped, and the defensive value wasn't the same when he returned after long layoffs. You can't anchor a team from the couch. The missed games stacked into a ledger you could feel. Season totals turned into gaps, and those gaps became the story. Eventually, Seattle sent him to the Mets in December 2018 with approximately $20 million attached, because that was the only way to move the deal. He left town with checks still flowing. Seattle continued paying $3.75 million annually through 2023. Both clubs paid for the privilege of hoping the rest of the contract would hurt less somewhere else. Here's the messy part. Teams learn the hard way. PED suspensions don't void guaranteed deals. You lose the player, not the obligation, and you carry the clubhouse fallout even after the games resume. To put this into perspective, the dollars per suspended day ran into luxury territory fast. Seattle paid for days without games. The Mets paid for the same thing later. It turned into a shared dead money loop that no one enjoyed and no one could stop. And the deferred money? That's the franchise subscription to regret. Payments stretching beyond the box scores make the sting last longer than the highlights. Every spring, a reminder shows up on the balance sheet even if the name isn't in the lineup. Moving him was never simple. A no-trade stance limits leverage, and the optics scare suitors. Any exit required wiring cash to the other team just to relocate the headache. That's not a trade. That's payroll triage. The mini payoff is blunt. Seattle paid star money for off-field availability. Guaranteed dollars plus suspensions turned into payroll ghosts that haunted two teams and solved nothing on the field. From paying for absence to paying for pep talks. Jason Heyward. The most valuable performance came during a rain delay. Chicago signed an 8-year, $184 million deal for a player they believed could win on the margins. Elite defense in right field, clean base running, and a steady voice in a young clubhouse. The front office didn't buy a 40-homer bat. They went after prevention, runs you never allow, and a veteran who would steady the group when the series got tight. The tension showed up fast. The bat never really showed. In 2016, his first year with the Cubs, his OPS dropped to .631, a problem at a corner spot that usually demands punch. When you slot a corner outfielder into the middle or bottom of the order at that production level, the lineup math gets tough. While his offense improved to .717 OPS in 2017 and .730. In 2018, these were still below expectations for a corner outfielder earning $23 million annually. You can hide a light bat at shortstop. You can't hide it in right field when the payroll says star. Defensive value did exist. Jumps, routes, and arm played. Over full seasons, he saved runs and turned extra base hits into loud outs. That still leaves a gap when the check size is $184 million. You can stack great defense and smart base running, but without consistent on-base skills or slug, the WAR column doesn't rise fast enough to match the salary. To put this into perspective, the cost per OPS point during that disastrous 2016 season looked brutal, next to a league average right or left fielder earning far less. The insight here is simple. Intangibles matter. Clubhouses need adults, and young cores benefit from calm voices. But at mega deal prices, you also need OBP and slug to carry weight. If your offensive floor collapses, the intangibles look like add-ons rather than pillars. The cash-to-production ratio starts scaring potential trade partners, and the contract sticks. That's where no-trade rigidity kicks in. Even without a formal block, the market behaved like one because suitors did the math. Taking on that deal for a glove-first corner bat creates a cap on what any team will offer, unless a chunk of money moves with the player. At that point, keeping him and hoping for a rebound often feels like the only choice. Then there's the lore. The rain delay speech in Game 7 of 2016 became a Chicago legend. Fans point to it as turning the mood and steadying the dugout when everything felt shaky. The box scores across the next several years, though, told a different story. The leadership glow lived in highlight reels and parades. The day-to-day slugging didn't follow. So the mini payoff lands like this. Leadership didn't match the spreadsheet. Paying top of market for intangibles creates a valuation gap that the bat needs to fill and didn't. When performance is middling, at least you can pitch. Or not. Barry Zito. The first $100 million pitcher became the $18 million fifth starter. That's the whole arc in one line. The Giants chased past Cy Young shine with a 7-year check, betting the famous curveball would age like a classic. The thing is, the radar gun and the spin didn't sign the contract. Early on, the velocity dipped a tick, the big breaking ball lost bite, and starts turned into long traffic jams. You pay ace money expecting clean innings. You get stress and bullpen calls. Across those seasons, the ERAs hovered around the 5.00 neighborhood, which for a frontline deal is a red flag you can see from McCovey Cove ERA, plus lived under league average more often than not, so even after ballpark effects you weren't getting a neutral arm. WAR totals stayed light, reflecting a workload that didn't push wins and didn't erase runs. To put this into perspective, when the run prevention isn't there, every inning feels like a concession to sunk cost rather than a competitive edge. There were real low points. One year, despite the salary, he didn't make the postseason roster. That's a blunt evaluation. When October arrives and the team looks at the board and says, "Thanks, but no," you know where the performance sits. The role slid toward the back of the rotation, and starts looked like innings-eating assignments rather than matchup weapons. Here's the insight that stings teams. Big contracts pay for past command and deception. Aging chips away at both, and without an out pitch, the margin for error disappears missed to the middle, and big league bats don't miss back. Walk a few, and the pitch count climbs. By the 5th, you're at 90, and the phone rings in the bullpen. Now the money lens. Cost per inning above replacement tells the story. When you're not beating league average, every extra out costs a premium. Some seasons, the club sent him out because of the paycheck, not the matchup, just to cover frames and protect the pen. That's paying to eat vegetables you don't like. A trade? The optics were rough. To move the deal, they would have had to pay to lose him, wiring cash so another team could try the reclamation. The front office absorbed it instead, rode out the term, and let the rest of the roster carry the weight. And that's the irony. The franchise won big while this contract sat on the books. Rings arrived around him, not because of him, which softens the noise, but not the ledger title banners can hide a contract, but the math still lives in the spreadsheet. The key takeaway is simple. Mediocrity at a premium saps flexibility and forces workarounds. Some teams doubled down and bought two problems at once: Crawford and Josh Hamilton. Arte Moreno tried to buy a parade and built an injury ward. Two splashy arrivals were supposed to solve relevance overnight. Instead, the trainers learned everyone's first name. The plan leaned on star power and headline value more than fit, timelines, or health risk. Two marquee names, two giant checks, and one owner sure the quickest way to October was through a billboard. The thing is, the roster had aging legs and nowhere to hide them once the aches showed up. The tension started with soft tissue pulls and lingered with surgeries. Athleticism slid, speed turned into soreness, and the DH spot became a waiting room. When the DH chair fills, you can't rotate days off to manage others. That logjam forces bats into the field that shouldn't be there and pushes healthier role players off the card. Off-field issues added another layer. So even when bodies felt good, availability didn't. Crawford arrived with durability concerns that had been circling for years. When healthy, his game relied on burst, first-step speed, range in left, and pressure on the bases. Those are the traits most vulnerable when hamstrings bark and wrists need rest. Each nick took a tool off the table, and the returns shrank from dynamic to replacement-level fill-in. Hamilton's shoulder problems and relapse battles made any rhythm hard to build. One week would show flashes, the next brought setbacks or time away. The expected middle-of-the-order punch turned into lineup rewrites by lunch. Medical risk modeling flags exactly this bundle: aging speed, prior soft tissue history, and recent procedures. Upside bets became availability holes because the traits paid for are the ones most likely to fade. To put this into perspective, days on the IL piled up fast enough that you could measure cost per calendar square. Salary went out whether games happened or not, and some checks effectively paid for production happening in another uniform after exits. Moving the money took more money. No trade protections and reputations reduced leverage, so every phone call included the same line: how much cash are you sending? Buyouts and subsidies stacked on top of the original deals, turning sunk costs into layered costs. That's how a bad bet becomes two: the contract and the exit strategy. And the deferred curse showed up like clockwork. Payments lingered long after the bats left town, so the payroll carried ghosts while the roster tried to reset. Cap strategy turned into cleanup duty, with future budgets tied to yesterday's rehab updates. The mini payoff is blunt: expensive stars, minimal WAR. Stack volatility, and you multiply the downside because injuries and absences don't take turns. If availability is value, what if the player vanishes entirely? Jacoby Ellsbury. $153 million for speed and defense. Then 3 straight years of 0 games. That's the headline. The Yankees went shopping for the 2011 version. Elite range in center, gap power, base-stealing threat, and a player who could calm the outfield for most of a decade. They wanted stability up the middle and a contact bat that kept innings moving. The thing is, the traits they paid for depended on staying healthy, and the calendar had other plans. Trouble showed up early and never really left. Small injuries turned into bigger ones, and the performance dipped between rehab stints. The no-trade protection and the size of the deal meant the team couldn't cleanly pivot when the legs and core kept barking. They kept paying a premium for a lineup spot that stayed empty. Every spring brought another timeline and another pause, and the roster kept a space with his name on it while the standings moved on. Across 7 years, he suited up for only 520 games. Hamstring and hip issues led to shutdowns. Shoulder problems popped up. There were core surgeries and setbacks that reset the clock again. Rehab disagreements added noise, with questions about where and how he trained and which doctors cleared what. The absence piled up season by season until 3 straight years went by without a single appearance. That's not a slump, that's silence. Here's the insight that teams hate living through. When durability risk meets guaranteed money, medical timelines turn into payroll sinkholes. You can't hedge with performance clauses. You can't prorate the cap hit because the player didn't run to first. The contract pays out while the trainer's room decides whether a core muscle will cooperate. Now the money lens. The salary per missed game climbed into luxury territory fast when the count of DNPs outpaced the box scores. Whole seasons went by with 8-figure checks attached to rehab updates rather than highlights. To put this into perspective, the annual cost while off the roster could have covered a solid starter or 2 bullpen pieces and a bench bat, but the dollars were already spoken for. Contract rigidity made an exit a fantasy. A no-trade stance, limited market for an injured high AAV center fielder, and the optics of attaching massive cash scared off suitors. Grievance issues extended the shadow, keeping his name in team statements and on balance sheets long after the lineup card stopped listing him. Fans leaned into jokes about him being a myth. The jokes landed because the checks still cleared, the uniform hung there, and the turnstiles spun without him. The mini payoff is blunt: a high AAV center fielder with no center field. Availability is the most valuable skill teams can't buy. Paying for nostalgia can feel just as empty. Miguel Cabrera. A legend got paid like a prime slugger to hit like a 40-year-old. Detroit didn't hand out a normal contract. They stapled extra years onto a franchise icon to lock in goodwill, jersey sales, and a face of the rebuild. The extension reached far beyond the peak, and it treated future decline as a branding expense. That's how you end up paying for memories at star prices. The setup looked simple. Keep Miguel Cabrera in the uniform where he won MVPs and led lineups. In 2014, Detroit signed him to an 8-year, $248 million extension covering 2016 to 2023, which combined with his existing deal created a total commitment of 10 years and $292 million. The front office valued legacy and stability after a run of contention. The thing is, time taxes bat speed and legs. Mobility dipped. Power followed. What was once easy opposite field carry turned into warning track flyouts, and first base defense slipped to the point where the best home was DH. By the late years, the slash lines hovered near .240 with a light slug. Extra base hits thinned out, and rallies needed 3 singles instead of 1 swing. As a DH-only piece, he used a lineup spot without offering the defensive trade-off a manager could use somewhere else. To put this into perspective, a DH who doesn't slug squeezes the bench and narrows pinch hit options because you're already locked into low-impact at-bats. Extensions that prepay decline years magnify risk because they remove optionality. Fans love the name on the back, but spreadsheets track hard contact, barrel rate, and age curves. When those curves tilt down, the cash doesn't tilt with them. The contract stays flat while production slides, and the gap becomes the story of the season. Run the money lens, and it gets blunt. The final year's salary sat at $32 million in both 2022 and 2023, the nostalgia tax. Every RBI in the late seasons carried a hefty per-unit cost because the counting stats didn't move much. When a full month ends with a handful of runs driven in, you're paying a premium for quiet box scores. The structure locked Detroit in. Deferred pieces and protection clauses limited flexibility, and the no-trade reality made any exit a fantasy. There wasn't a market for an aging high AAV DH with limited power, and the club wasn't going to attach young talent just to erase a Legends deal from the books. So they lived with it. Culture has value. Stadium ovations, milestone chases, and a familiar star cell tickets. But the competitive window shifted to a rebuild while the bill stayed elite tier. It's safe to say the team paid yesterday's price during a tomorrow project, and that cost rippled into roster depth. Here's the mini payoff. Statuesque legacy, static bat speed. Loyalty clauses cost real wins when the decline arrives right on time. Sometimes the problem isn't stars, it's paying middle tier like stars forever. Eric Hosmer. The Padres paid 8 years for ground balls, then paid prospects to ship them out. That's the deal in one breath. Eric Hosmer arrived with a World Series halo and a scout-friendly resume of leadership, clubhouse presence, and a winning player label. San Diego wanted credibility for a young core and a name to stand in front of cameras. They signed a mid-power first baseman whose contact lived on the dirt, not in the seats, and hoped the rest would rise with him. The thing is, first base is a bat-first job. When the batted ball profile leans heavy grounders, the ceiling lowers fast. Hosmer's hard contact rates lagged behind true middle-of-the-order bats, and his launch angle stayed low, which turned hard-hit balls into two-hoppers at the pull-side infielder. That approach can play on a short deal with a friendly salary. On an 8-year commitment, it drags the lineup because the position normally supplies extra base damage. To put this into perspective, his OPS plus hovered near league average for long stretches, which makes him a role player paid like a pillar. Defensive metrics were mixed, with some years grading fine hands and others dinging range. At first base, even average defense can't make up for modest slug. The check demanded middle-of-the-order punch, and the stat line kept returning acceptable. Here's the market truth. Replacement-level-ish first basemen show up every winter for a fraction of the cost. Locking one up for nearly a decade blocks upside prospects, slows lineup tinkering, and turns every hot AAA bat into a math problem. If the veteran holds the job, the growth path for a cheaper, higher ceiling option gets squeezed. Now the money lens. Cost per WAR landed in the red because the production didn't stack. When the roster pivoted towards stars, moving Hosmer required a prospect tax attached to the contract, with San Diego also eating money to make the swap happen. You pay to sign him, then you pay again to unsign him. That's a tough line item during contention. No trade dynamics narrowed exits. Limited destinations fit his preference list and his salary slot, so leverage disappeared. Interested teams asked for cash and sweeteners. The Padres agreed because the roster needed air. As the lineup evolved around premium bats and a tighter infield defense, the contract fought back by holding a spot without matching output. The mini payoff is clear. Overpaying for mediocrity creates trade penalties, and the opportunity cost shows up in postponed promotions and budget strain. The key takeaway is simple. Payroll isn't just a number. It's a set of choices you lose when you buy average at a premium. After all this, teams still swing big at risky mega deals. Teams say they've learned. The contracts say otherwise. Front offices now talk about aging curves and risk management, then turn around and hand out decade-long checks with ironclad clauses. The label has changed from albatross to organizational cornerstone, but the math at the end often reads the same. Start with Aaron Judge's $360 million deal. It makes sense today. He crushes baseballs, sells tickets, and sets the tone. The gamble lives in years 7, 8, and 9. Large frames and late 30s outfielders tend to lose range first, then bat speed. Defenses slide from center or right to more DH days, and the value stack shifts from 5 tools to 2. To put this into perspective, a 40-homer bat still plays. But if it comes with fewer games and less defense, the margin thins fast. Clubs accept the late drag because the early years carry banners and brand power. The thing is, Anthony Rendon shows how quickly elite becomes unavailable. He signed for star money with a full no-trade clause and a high AAV, then injuries kept chopping the calendar, soft tissue pulls, leg issues, and returns that didn't stick, turned prime production into scattered weeks. Cost per missed game in recent seasons ballooned into a line item that sounds like satire. When a third baseman with a star salary gives you 40 or 50 games, you start treating each plate appearance like an event with ticket pricing. Age curves don't care about press conferences. Defensive value tends to slide in the mid-30s, recovery time stretches, and minor tweaks linger. Power can survive the longest, but even that often dips as the lower half loses snap. Project those traits into the back half of long deals, and you get fewer reps in the field and more at-bats at DH. It's safe to say the variance grows every year after 35. New rules don't slow this down. The CBA and luxury tax tiers encourage teams to spread risk across 10 years to lower the annual hit. Deferrals kick cash into the future, which creates cleaner books today and dusty IOUs tomorrow. It solves the present and hands the next GM a spreadsheet with ghosts. You're still paying for last decade while the roster churns. Stars demand no trade or no move clauses because stability has value. They want roots, control, and a promise they won't be shipped mid-dip. Clubs accept the trapdoors because, without them, the player walks. That's superstar scarcity at work. The late years become a shared bet on health. So here's the mini payoff. Lessons repeat, because the market keeps rewarding star peaks with decade-long guarantees. Structure, not just talent, decides whether the pain hits hard. Close the loop. The best trade might still be the one you never make. Bad contracts don't just miss on talent. No trade clauses turn slumps into hostages, and deferrals keep writing checks after the bat or arm goes quiet. To put this into perspective, the worst line on a budget isn't the AAV. It's the years you can't undo. If you enjoy Baseball Explainer videos, consider subscribing and tell us which deal you think will age the worst 5 years from now. The thing is, fans spot the trapdoors before the press conference ends. Hope is expensive. Regret accrues interest. It's safe to say the cleanest win is often restraint, and the best trade is the one you don't make. If you like this video, like and subscribe for 1,000 years of luck.